everybody, it's your ghoul, Pony, and today we're going to be discussing issue 4 of the Monster High new Scaremester series, as well as the Howliday Haunt issue. The Howliday issue technically released first, however, we're going to be starting with issue 4, as I believe that it is meant to come first in the timeline. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Issue 4 opens with a mysterious account popping up on EekTalk. It's, of course, Crypt Crier, and they promise that they have some killer insight into everything that's been going on. The hooded figure brings up Bloodgood's disappearance and how strange it is that a ghoul so dedicated to Monster High would just leave. Some of the students, such as Drac and Frankie, believe that this is a good point, but others like Claudine and Deuce aren't buying it. Crypt Crier then goes on to speculate about Deuce's loyalties, showing a video of him and Claudine as proof of his wandering eyes. This intro reveals Crypt Crier's existence to the student body. For the past issues, we've been the ones hearing about all of their speculation, but now, everybody can. I like this new turn, as the characters being aware of all these rumors and Crypt Crier being a presence that can stir up drama could prove to be a fun plot point. We are already starting to see the result of that, as Cleo immediately sees the gossip about her beloved and is not having it. She's in the middle of physical education with the rest of her classmates, who are doing their best to win a game of Dodge Skull. The zombie team seems to be more coordinated than usual, and the coach mentions that they can move like a hive mind when focused. Pay attention to that. Seems like a important detail that may come up later in the series. We then jump to the Graveball game, where our team isn't doing so hot. The Fear-leading team is doing their beast to keep spirits up, but Torlai thinks that Drac's a liability, and another member, Dekayla, hasn't shown up. Cleo tells Torlai that maybe she's the one who needs a break, and most of the team jumps on board, deciding that Cleo should be their new captain. Torlai concedes, unhappily. But there's at least one team member who hasn't followed the pack. Claudine steps aside and tries to talk to Torlai, who is still upset with the werewolf for dumping her over text. Claudine tells her that despite Cleo's complaints, she's been a great fear-leading captain. A statement that Torlai seems surprised by. The Graveball team itself isn't faring much better. Monster High is on a losing streak. During the game, Draculaura bumps into Frankie, causing her to fall apart. Cleo tells the vampire that she looks worn out. Draculaura flies away in tears, and Claudine chews into the mummy for embarrassing the ghoul in front of everybody. Cleo insists that she was just looking out for her friend, and that Claudine of all monsters would know a great deal about embarrassing people, considering she's been hitting on Deuce. Claudine insists that she's not into dudes, but Cleo says that the flow of her feelings can always change, a sentiment that Claudine agrees with. Still, she's adamant that she and Deuce are nothing but friends, although she can't explain what it is they've been doing together. Cleo takes the silence as proof. Manny sees the wolf walk away and tells Deuce that it's understandable that he's been eyeing other ghouls, stating that Cleo's got a bull's temper. Deuce tells him that he's not eyeing other ghouls, and that he loves how hard Cleo tries to be the best and do her best, even if she gets too caught up in it sometimes. I've mentioned in other videos that I find it funny that Manny seems to have done a complete 180 from his typical personality, and that is shown here too, with this amusing panel where he says that it's rich kids like Cleo who continue to enforce all the outdated rules that they've been made to follow. Back with the Fear Leaders, Frankie is totally electrified when Cleo calls her beastie again, before heading off to have a convo with her father. Deuce swoops in, wanting to talk with Cleo, but the ghoul is cold to this, still upset about the video of him and Claudine. Deuce also insists that there's nothing going on between them, but says that he can't explain what the real story is. Cleo says that if he can't be honest with her without the use of amulets or charms, then she wants nothing to do with him, and the two break up. Again. We really are averaging one per issue. Later, Frankie visits her father in Headmistress Bloodgood's office, which is temporarily his. He tells Frankie that he's heard about an EekTok account popping up, spreading misinformation about Bloodgood's whereabouts. Frankie doesn't know anything about the owner of the account, and tells him that even if she did, she doesn't want to be known as the ghoul who runs to the headmaster with everyone's secrets. Mr. Stein tells her that if there's nothing to report, then she can go, but she brings up some whispers that have been circulating about another normie attack. Mr. Stein insists that this couldn't happen, since Dracula's blood forbids any human to set foot on campus. Frankie is relieved, and Mr. Stein tells her that if anything strange happens with the vampire, to let him know. She nearly confides in him about Drac's state, but ultimately says that she's just been busy, and she'll let him know if anything changes. Mr. Stein thanks her, and says that he knows that he's been busy too, but he hopes that they'll be able to spend more time together soon. They hug, but Frankie's sight falls to the carpet, on which sits a single axe-shaped earring. The ghoul seems confused, scared, uncomfortable, and Cryptcrier narrates that sometimes the monsters we trust most can cast the darkest shadows. I called it! I knew that that earring was going to be important. Look, I knew that Mr. Stein was working for the villains. The free comic book day issue made that pretty clear. But this issue completely changes the vibes, in my opinion. Whereas before I thought he was reluctant, only aiding them due to blackmail, here he seems much more sinister. I do not trust this man. And I feel like he's enjoying being in charge of the school just a little bit too much. I'm very interested to see where he goes from here, as I doubt he'll be made into a super evil, totally on board villain. I'm sure they'll have him realize his mistakes, and most likely have his motivation be to protect his daughter. But he seems a bit more chill with this than I had originally thought. Well, I know that part of the reason why his face is obscured here is just because of the comic artist having to dance around copyright stuff. It does give another layer to this photo of him, Nora, and Hex. He's there, he's friends, but he's disconnected and in shadow. And he will, eventually, betray them. I actually kinda like that angle. It's not a twist that I was expecting, and he really does a good job filling that ominous role, especially with the way they keep framing him. Overall, I really enjoyed this issue. I mentioned earlier that I love the dynamic change of having Cryptcrier be a known figure, and the stakes are rising high enough to make a vampire flee. The character dynamics are getting really interesting, with some duos starting to stitch things up while others are being torn apart. And others getting stitched up and then torn apart and then stitched back up and then torn apart and then, well, you get the picture. Cleo and Deuce's breakup is a tiny bit sad to me since they literally just got back together, but it didn't feel unnatural. I'm actually very curious what's going on there since I was not under the impression that there was anything strange involving him and Claudine. I had assumed that it was quite simply that they're friends, but it seems like there's some secret side plot going on here. It makes me wonder what would draw them together that they wouldn't be able to tell Cleo about. I think this reveal will be important, as what that thing is could either make this all fit together perfectly, or fall very flat. But I am optimistic. It's nice to know there's still some layers to be peeled back here. I love nothing more than a good idea I can rotate around in my brain endlessly. It was nice to get a little bit of Deuce pointing out all the reasons why he loves Cleo as well. Despite all of her dramatics, he admires her drive and ambition. I'm also of the opinion that throughout all of Monster High, pretty much everything Cleo does makes so much more sense when you realize she has major fear of abandonment. Of course, that interpretation is mainly rooted in her old backstory, which we've been shown doesn't really apply here. Still, it's clear something is driving her to always be at the top of the social pyramid. We also have to throw in the obligatory Bloodgood mention. We get 2 new panels of her this issue, one of which is this fantastic picture of her on vacation. Too bad she's not actually having that great of a time right now, but hey, we can pretend. Additionally, on Cryptcrier's Eek-Talk stream, you can see 2 comments, one of which reads, "Bloodgood forever. She deserves a creeperific vacay and a merc-tail." And wow, it was so nice of them to include me in the comic again. No, but jokes aside, this comment is actually very sus to me, considering that the user's name is A_student_1. I am convinced that it is the kidnappers trying to throw everyone off their trail. I realized that the first sentence is spelled in a very unorthodox manner, and I tried to decode if there was some secret message, but no luck so far. All the capital letters in the message just spell BOGOFRVRS, which I can only make out to be buy one, get one forevers? So yeah, I don't think that's anything. If anyone is noticing details I'm not, please tell me, but I think I'm looking way too much into it. Also, after everything she's been through, I'm not sure a merc-tail is enough. Our ghoul may need to bust out the hard liquor. And now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's get ready for some freaky fierce festivity with the Howliday Haunt issue. Ah yes, this issue caused quite the stir when the initial cover and description released. Originally, I'd actually thought they were doing that classic comic cover deception where they put some big shocking thing on the front only to have it either be totally recontextualized or blatantly non-existent in the actual issue. But, as it turns out, no, this is just straight up a romance story between Johnny and Frankie. So, how does that pan out? Well, we begin back before the beginning, on the day before Frankie's first night of school. The ghoul has snuck onto campus so that she can gather her bearings and map the layout beforehand. So far, this series has run with the idea of Monster High being a night school, a concept which had previously been seen in G3. Whilst making her way around, Frankie overhears Johnny, who has been stuck in dead tension for the past 3,000 years, and is waiting out the final part of his sentence. They do actually throw a line in here that time is kind of screwy in the dead tension room, which I appreciate because Johnny being trapped longer than the school's most solidly stated founding date has always been a pain for me. Frankie has to leave, but makes Johnny promise that once he gets out, they'll talk, and tells him to remember that he will always be her first friend. Flash forward to the current day, and our main three are planning for the Howliday Ball. None of the ghouls have dates, so they all agree to go together as a group. During lunchtime, Johnny has an outburst towards Claude. He thinks that the Student Bloody Council hasn't been doing enough to get to the bottom of the missing students, and declares that if they aren't going to do anything, then maybe he will. After eating, Frankie confides in Cleo that she's been keeping a secret. She lost a leg the other week, and her dad was so distracted that he accidentally gave her 2 left feet. She enlists the mummy's help to relearn dancing, and Cleo agrees, but just gives her some videos and a playlist and then leaves her to her own devices. Frankie practices and eventually gets into the groove, only to realize that Johnny has been playing along to the music. She's originally angry at him for not keeping his promise. He hasn't talked to her since he got out of dead tension. Johnny says he wanted to talk to her, but he saw her being so popular and happy, and he didn't want to bring her down with his sorry, something came over me. With his bad reputation. Frankie's anger softens, and she asks him to play at the Howliday Ball since she's determined that she can only dance if it's his music. Johnny thinks the dance could be dangerous and doesn't want her to go. And she tells him that if he really wants to keep her safe, he could always be her date. If he isn't still with Operetta, which it turns out he isn't. On the night of the dance, Johnny comes to pick her up. The ghouls all got ready together, and Claudine and Frankie's father do not fully trust Johnny. For Claudine, this is part of an ongoing plot of her thinking romance is only a means to get hurt. Frankie leaves with her date on his ghost motorcycle, and everybody arrives at the ball. Frankie and Johnny are the talk of the dance, at least until Cleo arrives. She and Claudine are still on rocky terms. Draculaura is so tired that she's falling asleep at the table. Despite all of this, the ghouls are still determined to have a fantastic time. Meanwhile, Johnny tampers with the smoke machines, nearly getting caught by Mr. Rotter. The ghost returns to the dance floor to share some time with Frankie, but he's worried about the safety of the school and not being good enough for Frankie. He tells the ghoul that he's gotta keep her safe, even if it means leaving Monster High. Frankie's confused by this, but before she can get an answer, the room begins to fill with smoke. Suddenly, everyone starts blabbering out all of their secrets. It turns out that Johnny rigged the machines with a truth potion in an attempt to get someone to confess about the kidnappings. No one does. Instead, we get Draculaura discussing how overworked she is. Claudine saying that she does want to be with somebody, but she's scared to be hurt, and Cleo revealing that she misses when she and Claudine were close. Additionally, she mentions that Ghoulia is missing, something that to this point had not been shown and is not brought up in issue 4 either. Issue 5 is supposed to be dedicated to the zombie, so I'm guessing we'll hear more about this there, but it confused me just a little bit. We also see a character named Brooke state that she's the one who gave Johnny the truth potion. I have absolutely no idea who this is supposed to be. She's not a pre-existing Monster High character, and she's not in any of the other issues, and I am not sure if she'll be back in the future, but they kind of treat it like we should know who she is, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Johnny is devastated that his plan didn't work, and the whole school is mad at him for the stunt. With Draculaura's help, he and Frankie are able to escape before anybody else can get their claws on them. Johnny decides to leave Monster High to find the kidnappers. He tries to ask Frank to go with him, but she's determined to stay at school so that she can protect her friends. Before he goes, Johnny leaves Frankie with a mixtape on CD, as he says that ghost music can only be played on a dead medium. The two kiss, and she makes him promise that once they've saved all of their friends, he will come back to her. Johnny tells her that she is the greatest mind and kindest soul that he's ever known, and that is where our story ends. Your mileage on how much you enjoy this issue is probably going to be nearly entirely dependent on how you feel about Johnny and Frankie as a couple. For me, I thought their interactions were cute, and I like a lot of the ideas here. I can see the romance, and you all know that I'm down for bittersweet endings, but I also don't really feel any attachment to them. And I will 100% admit that that probably is because I still find the pairing quite random, and I'm a bit tired of the constant breakups. I definitely understand what they were going for, but I can't help but ask, if you wanted Frankie to fall for a bad boy musician, why not just have her and Holt get back together? They're a couple that's been strung along by Mattel for years without any real payoff, and a large part of the fandom still feels that Jackson and Holt are Frankie's best love interests. You could still have essentially the same plot point and ending, maybe with the added fact that Holt feels he has to leave, not just to investigate, but also because he doesn't feel safe at the school anymore, being half human. But taking the issue as is, I think it's perfectly fine and even sweet. I like the art, especially the covers. I don't really have that many interesting things to say about it. It's a slightly bittersweet romance between Frankie and Johnny, and if you're looking forward to that, you'll love it. If you're not looking forward to it, then you probably won't. There's a couple story elements that are confusing, like who Brooke is supposed to be and the fact that Ghoulie is missing now, but they're not distracting enough to break the issue for me. I will say I loved getting to see a bunch of the characters in the background at the party, and I'll show off some of them here. We get to see Rebecca, Venus, Valentine, Jennifer, Finnegan, and lots of others. We also get the return of DJ Spectra, which I find hilarious. OG fans know. You know what I'm talking about. There's lots of good expressions in this scene, and I loved getting to see Mr. Rotter in the comics for the first time. It's also worth noting that while many of these characters are wearing doll outfits, some of them have brand new looks. I don't think we'll be getting dolls of them or anything, but it's always fun to see. So, that is the gist of both issues. The plot continues to pick up, and new fascinating factors have been added. I'm very excited to see what happens next. Speaking of what happens next, I suppose that now is a good time to discuss the future of the series, as it seems to have changed a bit while I was working on this video. Firstly, I would like to discuss Volume 6's cover and description, so if you are someone who likes to go into these issues completely unaware, feel free to skip this bit. I will include a timestamp on the screen. Shortly after reading these issues, the solicitation for issue 6 dropped, and I was immediately so hyped. This is my favorite cover of the entire series so far. It's so gorgeous and dramatic, and I feel like it conveys the story well. The description for the issue is as follows. Knocking at death's door is a ghoul's lowest moment. When there is a problem, even a trip to the mall or a gossip sesh with your beasties can't fix, the students of Monster High find themselves turning to DF, the school's guidance counselor. Rebecca Steam has been spotted, rusty with tears outside of DF's office almost every day by this Scaremester. And just yesterday, dear Draculaura was spotted lingering outside his door. I have to admit, ghouls, I'm feeling a bit inspired by their vulnerability. I need your help, dear students. Howl at me with your gossip, your tips, and your secrets, and I'll bring them into the light. XOXO, Crypt Crier. Seeing Rebecca mentioned by name here made me lose my mind. I'm trying not to get too ahead of myself in case she ends up not actually being in the issue much. But I have been saying that I need to see how she's doing for the entire series so far. So the fact that we actually are makes me happy. Even if she is, going through it. Speaking of Rebecca, this B variant cover of Frankie is super cute, but I can't help but feel like it's a super missed opportunity to give us a Rebecca cover, considering she is apparently important enough to be name dropped, and Frankie already has 6 covers with her on them. I love my Frankenghoul, but come on, give another simulacrum a chance. I am, of course, very biased in this regard. The other development in the series that dropped while I was working on this was that it has been cut down to 7 issues, rather than the originally planned 10. Issue 6 and 7 are both 40 pages, which is the typical length of the holiday specials, rather than the standard issues. I have absolutely no more information on this than anyone else does. I have emailed IDW to ask if the Spring Break and Fear Book issues have also been cut, or if they're going to still be published, but it may be a while before they get back to me, and I'm not sure if they'll have answers. If they do respond, I will make sure to share that information with you all via a community post. I don't really care to speculate on why the series was cut, because that's all it would be, speculation, and I wasn't there behind the scenes, so I have no real insight. What I will say about it is that I'm a bit sad, as I was looking forward to having the full 10 issues, and I am hoping that the crew who have worked so hard to make this series happen were given due notice. It would really suck if they did not give them the proper time to plan accordingly. Interestingly, IDW also announced that they will be republishing I Only Have Eye for You, but in a paperback comic format. This is cute and fun to me, but also not that exciting considering this isn't new material, aside from the covers, which I am excited to see. They are splitting the story up into individual issues, so if they publish them all, we should be getting 6 total. These are going to retail at $3.99 US, so if you want every issue, it will end up costing you more than the original, which was $10 US. Regardless of if it's the new release or the original, I do highly recommend I Only Have I For You. It's been one of my favorite Monster High books for years now. The art is gorgeous and done by Monster High's original artist, Kelly Riley, and Helen Luffer does a fantastic job writing the characters. I am very much looking forward to the Heath and Abby stories republication, because I really want to see the new cover dedicated to them. And that's about all that I have for this video. Ghoulness, did we have a lot to discuss? Thanks so much for watching. As always, I will have some links in my description where you can find some donation sites to help people in Gaza and some other places as well that are needing assistance if you would like to take a look at those. And other than that, I would just love to hear all of your thoughts and theories in the comment section below. So yeah, as always, I hope that you have a spooktacular day.